No, a simple word, 2 letters. A word that most language beginners will learn in their first few weeks of learning any language. As a student that is trilingual, growing up, I found it really hard to find the word no or any words of rejection inside my vocabulary. It was something that haunted me as I grew up, as I felt that simply saying yes will show acceptance to everything and would put me in a better situation. However, nevertheless, in the long term, I often felt suffocated and stuck. This often built me an identity that was viewed as being easy to talk to, soft, to others around me, and many times this identity was used against me. As I lived through many years of my life, often feeling restricted and oppressed, I was sent into a constant loophole, as I never said no and regretted afterhand. Therefore, in desperation, in the summer of 2024, I decided to go on a journey to find out exactly why I didn't have the courage to say no, and to regain this courage I should have to live my own life. In order to be succeeding in this journey, I had to find the 2 main obstacles and burdens that were stopping me and weighing me down. Firstly, cultural pressure. As a kid who grew up in Asian culture, ground rules were embedded in our identity and skin in youth. There were rules that were never meant to be touched on or challenged. I remember the feeling of sitting at the dinner table and unable to stuff any more food down in my stomach, my body weighing a ton. But despite of that, I remember the vigorous placement of food into my bowl, the murmurs beside me of telling me that I should eat more food. And still, even when I couldn't finish the food, I remember them using religion as a threat to me, as they tell me to dump my own food as God was watching my every single move. I remember when I was even smaller, I was told countless tales of if I didn't finish all my food, if I didn't finish every individual pieces of my food, then my future boyfriend is going to have the amount of pimples and scars according to the amount of rice and food left into the bowl. I know it sounds dumb, but the small Elsa believed in those tales and always finished her food. Though growing up, I was a single child inside my family, I wasn't the single child in the whole family, as I had 2 adorable cousins. But I think we all know that young kids are really obnoxious. And whenever I went back with my family, I always had the grave responsibility of taking care of them. Don't get me wrong, I love spending time with my cousins. But often, the love for them were torn back by traditional sayings and rules I had to follow. For example, 让贤于弟. This was a traditional saying that I was taught that I had to prioritize the younger over the old. This often means a lot of my possessions that I really liked were asked to give to these younger cousins. And a lot of the times when accidents happen, I had to take up the responsibility. Back then, I never really had the courage to protest and to protect those possessions that I really, really liked. These rules that seemed so minor were so rooted that they invisibly took away a lot of my courage that I had. And I wasn't even able to express and properly tell my thoughts in front of people who should have been the closest ones to me. Secondly, the guilt and fear. The guilt and fear was like a psychological fence I could never cross. The thought of saying no when looking into another person's eyes scared me and threatened me, as it reminded me so much of the feeling that I got when I got rejected by others. Maybe part of it was also neurobiotic factors, our brain activating, triggering our stress response, making our palms sweat, making us more nervous when we're trying to reject others. Personally, also a big part of this was the overthinking that just rushes upon our brain. The thought of, is she going to stop liking me if I don't agree with this? Are they going to stop playing with me? The social and connection bond that could be lost? However, these are often illusions in times, and they actually don't really come true, trust me. Secondly, the factor is fear. and the societal standards that are set upon us. Growing up, I was told many things as how rejection is impolite, and how the less conflict the better, and how sometimes personal rights could be sacrificed for social harmony. These mental factors all combined, when absorbed more carefully, could really stress a person out and take away their courage. Whenever, for me personally, I try to reject others, images of what could possibly happen always rushes through my brain, making me unable to say anything and unable to say no. These problems could seem like they could never be solved, as I couldn't just get a new and perfect family or suddenly become someone that's super confident and extroverted. There's still ways to improve this circumstance as I believed it. A mental shift, maybe a bit of courage, and maybe a few tips to help you communicate better. Firstly, the mentality. As I started to get older, I realized the thought of guilt could happen to individuals who got rejected before. We're thinking of the impact to this, and we often think that the person we're rejecting has a larger impact. However, the truth is, most of the time, the stakeholders who's actually expressing the rejection carries a lot of stress and burden along with them. When we're stuffing down our thoughts into our hearts, when we're bringing down the freedom that we should have, when we're losing the chance of expressing ourselves, these are impacts that would significantly impact us, tiring our own mental health. Over time, this makes living quite difficult. Therefore, this mentality tells us and reminds us that we can't make everyone happy, we can't satisfy everyone, and relationships shouldn't be built on the basis of agreeableness and sacrifice, but morely out of respect and freedom of expression. We also have to remember that the person that will stay with us forever is ourselves. At the end of the day, relationships end. People die. People pass away. The only person that will be staying with you forever is yourself. Therefore, it makes it reasonable to always prioritize yourself. And you should be the top priority. Then, the hardest part, a tiny bit of courage. I realize for people like us, for people like me, saying no might not be easy. Just like life, nothing comes easy. Everything requires practice for you to try again and again and again. Maybe failing, maybe succeeding. But when we try again and again, this process allows us to normalize saying no, making it easier as time goes by. Therefore, having this bit of courage helps us unlock a potentially better life. It helps us unlock the freedom that we should have. And even if something bad happens, it can't be that bad. Nothing in life is that bad. And it's just saying no. It's just expressing your thoughts. It's not as scary as you think, believe me. Lastly, a bit of tips that hopefully help. The reason why we say no at the end of the day is to be able to communicate our thoughts and feelings clearly. Therefore, enabling clear communication is an essential part of doing so. When rejecting, having direct reasoning and logic helps make it easier for the receiving end to understand exactly why you feel a certain way. On top of that, when you're rejecting others or expressing your thought, make sure that you keep a stable tone so you don't engage in emotions in the conversation, making it easier to still retain bonds even after rejection and have relationships with clear boundaries. Therefore, in conclusion, I'm here to tell you all that I did it. I was able to say no, and it wasn't as scary as I thought. And I'm here to tell you that it brought me many benefits as I was able to open up freely, and I was able to initiate myself in a higher position. I was able to set myself up in a better spot of succeeding. Therefore, I urge you all, as I did it, I believe people who are in the world, people who might also be afraid to say no or place rejection, could also have the courage to do so. Thank you.